Welcome to The Real Build. This is your host, Jamila. Every Tuesday, we are talking about the real estate industry and, not just about buying and selling, but everything in behind it, building, constructing, developing it, all the tips and tricks. I have a wonderful guest with me. You'll remember him from the beginning of the seasons of the show, Andre Burlacu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me yet again.
Oh, I love it when you're on the show. Andre and I have worked together for how many years now?
Almost 7, I think, this next summer.
You're about to outlast my marriages.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but hey, I'll take it.
We've been building and developing a multifamily fourplexes, condo buildings together, and it's always a delight to have him here because we kind of read each other's minds, so the shows go wonderful.
Yes.
We have a super fun topic today. I really wanted to focus on something that could really benefit a lot of the listeners out there in the Kelowna and West Kelowna area, our local municipalities, on something they're probably thinking about doing in the future, maybe in the next, 5-10-year plan. And there's only ever been really one traditional way to do this. And the recent changes in zoning of properties has opened up a whole new opportunity, and we want to get people to hear about it, and that is downsizing.
Yes, there's a whole new way you can actually do it.
Now, downsizing, I remember when this word started becoming popular and it was dreaded, and people are like, how am I going to get all of this furniture into a condo?
Exactly. Yeah, it was always going from the nice dream house that you had to this condo that doesn't necessarily suit your needs or is a little bit too small or doesn't have the furnishings that you want.
And the buffet and hutch that is filled with china.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like, but you're going to want this someday. It's like, Mom, I'm sorry. I don't want the china.
You're the only one that actually wants
or
this.
the buffet and hutch. However, downsizing has become trendy and popular, and releasing of those things and creating more freedom, breaking away from that home, traveling.
Yeah, that's a huge one, right? Like it gives you the ability to travel. You got a little bit maybe money in your pocket, but you can always you don't have to worry about this big house that's just kind of hanging in the background there.
Yeah. And it's, it's still, a lot of selling all the furniture, letting go of a home you probably have spent 20, 30 years in, raised children, have had grandchildren in there. And it's emotional, right? But outside of the house, you've got your coffee shop, you've got your grocery store, you've got your flower bed with your roses you've been blooming for 20 years.
Yep.
There's a lot of attachment to that property and that space and that routine.
Especially because, you probably bought that house in an area that you really like, right? Like you bought that house for a reason. You bought it in that area for a reason. So it's almost, a little bit of a shame if you have to downsize and make that kind of lateral move to something smaller, but you're losing that area that you're so fond of.
Yeah. And so what we want to talk to you about today is that maybe you can downsize and stay on your property.
Stay on your land. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just downsize and stay on your property and stay on your land, but also increase your net worth and your generational wealth that you hand down to your family.
Yep.
So now, have your parents downsized?
Not yet.
No,
they haven't yet.
No, they're still have the big house.
Yep, they still got a big house, but they're actively thinking about it. And, with the recent changes that have come from the BC government, they're actually contemplating this strategy, this new form of downsizing, which we'll get into here.
Yeah. So what we want to talk about today is, if traditionally you were going to downsize, you would call up your realtor, get an assessment value on your home, and they would come and they'd look at other sales in the neighborhood and give you an idea of what they think it could potentially sell for.
Yep.
And then you probably would be quite happy with that number. I mean, after having the home for
Yeah, 20, 30 years.
20, 30 years, you probably have seen a pretty good return on investment on this home. Even 10 years, really, because of how much increase in value we've had in homes over the last decade.
Yeah.
But, and so you get this number that you could potentially shop with. And then you go out and you start looking at different condos or townhomes and maybe new condos and townhomes, brand new homes, which we build all the time. They're super fun. But you might find that you're going to spend a bit more than you have anticipated to get into something new. And maybe there isn't as much money left over to spend the year in Europe or buy something in Mexico, you know? And the money may not go as far as you think that it was going to go. And that might stall you out from continuing the downsizing journey, right?
Yeah. I mean, construction costs have gone up significantly. Codes have gone up. Building codes have gone up. Everything is not as inexpensive as it once was.
Well, and then you realize, where are you going to put the cars?
Yeah.
And the tools and the Christmas tree and the things you've acquired over your lifetime, because there isn't a lot of storage in traditional townhome and condo living. And maybe there needs to be a transition between this condo and townhome.
Yeah, and I mean the big one for me is losing the area that you're in, because typically, and I mean, you see a few different examples here in Kelowna, but typically you're not going to find that condo living right next to or in the same neighborhood that you've had your single family home. Typically that doesn't happen. And I'm a big proponent of buying for the area as well as buying the building, but maintaining that area is really crucial. And I think this is a very creative way in which you can maintain the area that you're living in, keep the same neighborhood, and possibly have a new home.
Well, and neighbors is a big thing too. A lot of times your neighbors become lifelong friends.
Yep.
You know, people you spend your Friday afternoons and Saturdays with, and, you know, exchange a beer over the fence while you're mowing the lawn, and, you know, they become a fabric of your lifestyle. And so leaving all of that behind can be a lot. Now, there's a way that you don't have to leave that behind.
Yeah.
There's a way that now, with rezoning all single family home properties in BC to accommodate up to 4 doors on the property, that you potentially could build your downsized space in your backyard.
That's right.
Or front yard. And you could keep the house there or replace the house. There's a lot of options that you can do. But instead of selling the home, we're saying build it in the backyard.
Yeah. Okay. So what are some of these options that we've seen or that we've come up with for people who are wanting to go down this path?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that condos and townhomes tend to be just a bit undersized for what people are looking for. Bedrooms are a bit tight,
especially for a downsizer.
Yeah, and storage is necessary. And so creating a space that's, instead of the 1,200-1,300 square foot 2-bedroom, maybe has a den condo, you could create an 1,800 square foot 3-bedroom, have a craft room, 1 level space that has storage. And the other thing is the garage. So maybe this is created on top of a new shop, where you have your garage and you have a place to putter around and work in and keep the boat and have the RV and have the toys that you might use to play with in the Okanagan Valley, the bikes, all of those things, and set this up in a way that works really well for you. And another big one is actually doing a duplex, where then you have additional rental revenue. Now, there's so much more to talk about on this, but we are going to just take a small break and we'll be back. Welcome back to The Real Build. Today we're talking about downsizing, and there's so many more options to downsizing today because of new jurisdiction rezoning that's happened right across BC. We have talked about this on the show before with other guests. Today I've got Andre Berlacu back in the studio. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Andre and I have worked for the last 7 years on multiple different infill developments, from fourplexes to condo buildings. And we have, I'm not going to say we've seen it all. There's still more to see, but we certainly love repurposing or upcycling existing infrastructure, existing land to create new homes. And really that's called infill. And you're going to hear more and more people say infill housing because of this densification. And specifically today, we want to talk about how you can utilize this to your advantage in your downsizing journey. There is another option, right?
Yes, a few other options actually. That is kind of the best of both worlds, keeping your area, but also downsizing.
Yeah. So in the last segment, we talked about some of the things that you go through in downsizing. And one of the biggest things we find is leaving your neighborhood.
Yep.
Leaving your rose bushes, leaving your coffee shop and your grocery store and your neighbors. So here's a way you can downsize into your own backyard or front yard, increase your net worth, and what's the other word I like to use all the time?
Be fabulous.
Generational wealth. That's what I was going for. I do use be fabulous all the time. So we now, why is this an option today?
Yeah, let's talk about the changes that happened that allowed this to come to fruition.
Andre, why don't you give us a rundown?
Sure. So I guess in 2024, 2023, the BC government kind of put this blanket policy over BC that allowed for single-family home lots in rural areas to have up to 4 units per property. And again, this depends on the size of your lot, but the blanket statement is any rural single-family home lot can now have 4 units, up to 4 units.
Yeah. And it was up to each municipality in the province to create bylaws on how they were going to implement this.
That's right.
Yeah. And they had till it was June of this year.
Yeah.
To do that. Exactly.
So we can see a few differences already that came from these changes. Mm-hmm. For example, Kelowna versus West Kelowna. Mm-hmm. In Kelowna, they stuck pretty close to the provincial mandate, and so single-family residential lots can have up to 4 units, again, if their size matches the requirements.
Yes.
Whereas if you look like somewhere like West Kelowna, they still achieved, in essence, the same mandate.
4 doors.
4 doors, but they did it more so with suites. So a duplex, so 2 units, with each of them having a suite or a basement suite or a side suite attached to them. So still 4 doors, but not, if you want to call them, full-sized units.
Yeah. So, I mean, the big difference there is that when you say 4 doors, you don't have, there's only so much you can build on a property. But when you have 4 doors, you have 4 individual titles, and those titles can be sold off to 4 different people. When you have a duplex with suites, you have 2 individual titles.
Exactly.
And they can be sold off to different people. Yeah. And then you have restrictions on the size of the suite. So they were able to achieve 4 residents on the property, just done in a slightly different way.
That's right.
And so each municipality has implemented their version of this. And if you're interested in figuring it out for yourself, you need to go to your municipality's website. So city of and your town.
Kelowna, West Kelowna, Penticton.
Bylaws. And you're going to search your zone.
Yep.
Which you can find. this is really hard to describe on the radio, but there is a mapping system where you can put in your address and you can find out what your lot is zoned, and then you can search within the bylaws what the definition of that zoning is to find out what you can do.
Typically, like a suburban, like your typical single family in a neighborhood is going to have a zone that's R something, RU something. So that just stands for residential.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can also give us a call and we can help you figure
Absolutely.
it out. Yeah. This is what we do. So you've got these different options. Now, because it says 4 doors or a duplex with suites, doesn't mean that's what you have to do. It doesn't mean that if you're going to do anything to your property, I have to tear my house down and rebuild a 4-plex.
Absolutely not. No.
That means you can be flexible with a lot of different options up to 4 doors.
And this is where the creative downsizing comes into play.
Yeah. Because you can keep your house if there's enough space on the property, and depending on where it's located on the property and so on. Again, something we can consult with you on and help you through. But you could build what you're looking to build in the backyard or in the front yard by adding a second home fitting underneath the bylaws, and there's your future downsizing.
Right.
You get to live in your home while the construction's going on, so you're not displaced out of your home. And maybe you don't choose to move into it right away. Maybe you rent it for a bit until you're ready to go into it. And then once you move into it, you can rent out your existing home and bring in cash flow. And that kind of ends up paying for what you've built back there in the backyard.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to get into way more into how this gets paid for later on in the show. So keep hanging on here, because we are going to talk about how that can happen for you. But what are some other options? Like what?
I mean, so my favorite, because I like tinkering with different cars, and I like having some shop space, is, let's say, for example, you have a single family home on a piece of land. You can put a shop in the backyard, and on top of that shop, you can have a unit. Let's say it's a 1,200 or 1,800 square foot unit on top of that shop space. So while that shop and the unit are being built, you maintain your residence in your home, and once that's completed, you can downsize into your backyard, into the unit above the shop. You can keep the shop all for yourself, and you can rent out that home in the front and have a little bit of extra cash flow coming in from that rental. So that's a concept that I personally really like, because it kind of suits the needs and desires that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's tons of people in Kelowna that would also like that idea.
Well, what about, your adult children? So you've put them through school, they're out there, they're successful, they're married, maybe they've had their first kid, and you want to help them out with buying a house. And sometimes that triggers downsizing, because it's like, okay, if I sell this house, I can get this money, we can buy something smaller, we can help our kids out with a down payment.
Sure.
And then, like we were talking in the first segment, you may not find the money goes as far as you expected. But because you can go up to 4 doors, you could look at putting 2 units.
Yeah, you could put 2 units above that shop, or you could scrap the shop altogether and just have 2 units with individual garages in the back. And so therefore you're creating 2 extra units that you can give to your kids, that one of them you can move into, and you can give your kids the house. Like, there's tons of different flexible options that can come from developing on the property that you already have. And again, this allows you to keep the same neighborhood that you fell in love with. You don't have to move very far, and it's a very cost-effective way to kind of increase that footprint.
Super cost-effective way. And next, we're going to talk all about that. So I know with downsizing, it's very easy to understand. I sell my house, I get a chunk of money, and I buy something else, and I stay mortgage free. That's a lot of the things. Like, I've worked my entire life to pay off this mortgage. I don't want a new mortgage. You're talking about not selling, adding things on, monthly payments. This sounds crazy and stressful. Well, we're going to tell you how it's not as stressful as you may think next. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila, and today we are talking about downsizing. Now, some people might be cringing when they hear that. Some people might be excited when they hear that. But today we've been talking about all the different things you go through when you're considering downsizing your home. And traditionally, it's been pretty straightforward. You sell off all your things, you sell your home, and you buy a condo or a townhome, and then, sail off into the sunset and travel and do all the things. It sounds really easy, but there's a lot of emotions wrapped up in there. And we have been unveiling and presenting this new opportunity that now exists for you in downsizing, where you can stay in your neighborhood, keep your routines, create a bit more space for yourself in your new unit, and live on your property. And that is by infill development and building your dream downsized space in your backyard or your front yard, and keeping the home there and renting that home out. And or we also talked about maybe there are elder parents or children, adult children that you want to help get into the market, and you can build a second unit, a duplex in the rear yard. Actually, you can get up to 4 units in the municipality of Kelowna. And you can create housing for the family, or just another rental unit that's going to bring in rental revenue. Now, right. I told you guys before the break, we are going to talk about how you pay for this. The traditional way is, you sell your house, you get a chunk of money. You take that money and you go buy something else. And the big thing is I don't want to have a mortgage again. That's what I hear a lot. I don't want to spend more than what I'm going to get for the house. I've worked my entire life to pay this mortgage off. I don't want a mortgage again. I am seeing Freedom 65 and I'm staying on track for that. And you're saying, don't sell my house, build in the backyard. I mean, I'm going to have a mortgage again.
Yeah.
Well, how do we do this? Andre, let's talk. You're the finance man. Let's talk about strategies on how this works.
Sure. So let's assume that you have a piece of property that's completely paid off, right? So you're not owing anything on that property. And you want to go down this route of downsizing, but maintaining your land, maintaining your property, and just making, let's say, another smaller unit on the property for yourself, and renting out your main home that is too big for you. You don't want to do the maintenance on it. So because you own that property outright, you have equity in your property. And it's 100% equity because you don't owe anything on the house. And so you can actually leverage against that equity that you have on your property. You can pull that money out to build this new unit on your property. And once you move in there and the construction is complete and you start renting out the main house, that in itself will pay for that equity that you pulled out. So that'll make that monthly bank payment. And you should actually be left over with some extra free cash flow coming in as well.
And so what that means is, and while it's under construction and you're utilizing that line of credit that on the home and the property, it's typically interest-only payments. So
correct.
You're not diving into a mortgage right off the top.
Nope. No, during construction, usually that interest payment is built into the deal.
Yeah.
And nothing is actually coming out of your pocket while you're doing the construction.
So at the end, you will end up with loan or mortgage for the value of the new construction now.
Correct.
But you will still have either asset, the original home, or the new downsized home that you've built to rent out. And that rental income, now when you plan this out and you strategize this out, you can ballpark all these numbers and make sure that that rental income is going to cover and exceed this new construction mortgage cost that's coming in. And that's all a part of planning this out properly with the right professionals helping you.
Exactly.
But the rental income should now cover that mortgage. So you're not out of pocket, but you have leveraged your hard-earned lifetime of work of paying off this mortgage to now increase your net worth to the additional value of this new construction that's in the yard.
Exactly.
And the job of renting the home out then pays for that new construction.
Yeah. So let's say that this new residence that you built in your backyard, it cost you $350,000 to build. Well, the value of that new residence that you put back there typically is more than what it costs to build. And so that is where you actually see an increase in your net worth. So your property now went from being worth only, let's say, $1 million to now it's worth somewhere 1.5 because you have this additional unit in the backyard and it only costs you an extra $350,000 to build. And so you've created that delta between your new value and your existing value plus that construction.
And the reason why you get an uplift, you might be thinking, well, why don't I just build a new house somewhere then? Well, the thing is you own your land right now, right? So you're not buying new land.
Correct.
To build on. And there's an uplift there in value. And so when that new construction is completed, it's going to account for land value, right?
That's right.
And that extra land value you already own, you've created a new lot essentially on your property, creates an uplift in value. And so now, and I love this concept of renting real estate as an investment, as creating long-term wealth, because there's no other way you can get somebody else to pay you money to put into your RSP.
That's true. Yep.
Like the neighbor's not going to give you, well, a single family home.
It's like $4,000 a month nowadays.
$4,000 a month to put into your RSP. Like people don't just hand that to you, but they will pay rent for that. And so they will be paying off that addition to your net worth. I get so excited about this topic. I feel like people won the lottery and they need to open up this opportunity.
And I mean, so there's a few different nuances that happen here while you're going through this process. And I think you touched on it earlier. Like, it's important to have somebody who's done this before and who can accurately budget what it's going to cost, who can accurately look at the appraisals in the future and make sure that you're creating something that isn't going to be a hindrance, but it will, create value for you in the future. And planning this out properly, making sure that you're not creating this monstrous build that is never going to sustain itself.
Yes.
Is crucial and critical in achieving those goals.
Yeah, this is not a blank check to design the Taj Mahal in your backyard.
No.
Like, there's a strategy to this, and making sure that whatever is going to be rented at the end, the value of that rent that comes in is going to cover the cost of what you're mortgaging for your construction.
And one thing we have on our side right now is, interest rates are coming into a level that makes it more approachable to take on projects like this.
Absolutely. Interest rates are coming down. And because of the interest rates going up, the residential construction area has slowed down a bit.
Quite a bit.
So there's people available. And it's a really good time to start looking at these projects. Now, there is a step-by-step process to this, to figuring out the viability of doing one of these projects on your property. And we've kind of broken it down, actually.
We have.
Yeah. We've created a pretty cool step-by-step process just to ease some of the anxiety and questions around what you could do and what is it going to cost me, because that's what everyone wants to know.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk more about that. Welcome back to The Real Build. I'm your host, Jamila, and today I have my partner and colleague, Andre Berlacu, on with us today. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me again.
And today we are dissecting downsizing.
Yes, we are. A better new way to do downsizing.
A better new way to do downsizing. With all of this bylaw changes across the province of BC, densifying single-family home properties, it has created a new opportunity for a lot of homeowners to add homes to their property. And we really wanted to specifically look at the opportunity of downsizing today and what you can do and still live in your neighborhood, keep your home, increase your net worth, have someone pay off your new construction.
Yep.
And create a space that really works for you, that has some storage, that has a larger bedroom, that has some garage and shop space, or somewhere to put the boat, or somewhere to keep the motorhome. And you may even still get to keep the rose bushes that you have been grooming for 15 years.
Very true.
So we talked in the last segment, how do you pay for this? And disclaimer, neither of us are mortgage brokers. However, we do develop a lot of multifamily projects, and understanding the overall concept of lending is something we need to do this. And it's part of the strategy, and it's understanding, whatever is being left to be rented on your property can cover the costs of what you're projecting to construct. So that's kind of the first stage in figuring out the viability of this project for you. And we did mention that our concept was if the land is paid off. Now, if your home is not paid off yet, if you still have, another 5-10 years of mortgage payments to do, you've probably have a little to pay off, not very much, but B, you've probably grown so much equity in the property that this still is a feasible project for you. And frankly, most people I deal with aren't totally done paying off their mortgage. They do still have a little bit left because they are pre-planning for the future for 5 to 10 years to be set up and ready to go. So you don't have to have your mortgage 100% paid off. We wanted to make sure we mentioned that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the process. So this is literally a service we actually offer for people, and this show has really been about dissecting construction and all these different tips and tricks. And today we really want to give you something that we specialize in to help you understand how you can do this process. So first off is the concept, right? Mm-hmm. What can I do? And with a development consultant like us, we can discuss your needs and wants of your new space. And we can figure out the footprint that would take. And if there is the space on your property with keeping the existing house or not. And we talked a lot about just adding 1 or 2 units to the backyard. Maybe you want to tear down this house. Maybe it has been driving you crazy your entire life. You hate it. You've tripped on that doorway enough times. No one can hear you from the kitchen. It's gotta go. Maybe you want to tear it down. We can do that too. But we've been talking the whole show about adding 1 or 2 units to the backyard. So we're going to keep on this concept.
Yes.
So what we like to do is we sit down and we understand the concept of what you're looking to do. Understand what is staying on the property to be rented, what that rental revenue is going to bring in, and what an approximate cost of construction is going to be to create this new space. And that is really the first dissection of the concept to see if it's viable, right?
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And I think you hit most of the points there. Is working with individuals, with the clients, and finding out, okay, I have this property, what can I do on it? What do I want to do on it as the client? Like for me, for example, I know that if I were to do this, I'd want to build a shop. Okay, so the shop is the non-negotiable. I'd like to have a shop, and on top of that, I'd like to have a couple of rental units that will help be a mortgage helper in the future, pay off for this new construction. And once that new construction is paid off, that's just cash flow that keeps coming in as, we reach retirement or whatever goals you have for traveling or anything like that. So finding out the client's goals is the first one. And then with that information, we can assess the property and see what is possible.
Yeah. And you don't really have to invest any money at that point, right?
No.
This is something, these are conversations you can have to figure out if the plan is feasible. But unfortunately, in the process of developing land, to get more concrete yeses or nos, you do have to invest some money in creating the plan.
Yes.
To get more concrete information.
And you need those concrete yeses or nos for people like your bank who are going to be lending against this project.
Yes.
For appraisals in the future, for budgets, so that you make sure you're not going over budget. So having a plan and investing that money up front will actually save you time and money in the future. Yeah.
So like actually creating the construction drawings, understanding what this building is going to cost to build by tendering it out, picking your finishes out to know what's going in it. And to do that, you need to have a land survey done. We need to know where the existing house is and where the new property is going to be placed. And that has to be feasible. We got to know it works. So our survey is what tells us.
Yep.
We need to understand that we're hitting energy efficiency guidelines within the construction, within the build, and that what we are pricing out, the build that we're creating, is actually buildable too,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
So doing just a preliminary drawing concept without consulting a builder or an energy advisor or trades right now in BC would be doing you a disservice, because they're mainly around energy guidelines now, right? Mainly around energy code. You don't want to have a concept that isn't buildable.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and you can run into some real sticky situations if you design something that doesn't take the energy efficiency in mind.
Yeah. And so being able to work with people that have the full concept, understand the full concept of this, and being able to get through that next process so that you have a plan that's buildable, where your selections are made and it's tendered and priced. This gives you your essentially business plan for the bank.
Exactly.
And they will understand what the cost of construction is, what your potential rental revenue is of whatever is being rented out. And they will then look at your finances.
Yeah, you get appraisals on that as to be built design. So you can see exactly what that will appraise at and what you can expect that value of the new addition to be.
And then the bank would give you the final approval to move ahead with your construction loan. And there's a couple places in there that we touch in with a mortgage broker to make sure we're on the right path of what the banks want to see. But not until you kind of get all that information together can you get a real go ahead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So it's a little bit nerve-wracking because you do have to invest some money to get there. But typically, with conversations with professionals that have done this before and understand the concept that you're doing, they can usually tell you yes, you would be a good candidate, or no, there's no way.
Right. Yeah.
No way this is going to work for you. There is your new concept of downsizing. If you want to hear more or understand more about what you can do, you can definitely reach out to myself or Andre. We're VLS Developments. You can find us online. And also, if you wished your partner listened to this show about downsizing, you can find us on YouTube, The Real Build, and you can even listen to past episodes that we have put up with lots of information as well about infill and other construction information. Thank you so much for listening. Andre, thank you for coming today.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was great.
Until next time, we'll see you next Tuesday.